Good morning. I want to wake everybody up. Good morning. Welcome to the 35th CALLERLAB Convention. Today is Tuesday. This is the music licensing session. Did you know? And hopefully you know a lot. We're counting on you knowing a lot. My name is Tom Dillander. I'm owner of Palomino Records, Hanhurst Music Review Service. I'm also a producer of Chaparral Records, among a few other labels, but that's the main one. I'm the moderator. Our panelist today is Mr. Buddy Weaver, producer, owner of Hi-Hat, Blue Star, Blue Ribbon, Dance Ranch, EZ, Petticoat Patter, Bogan, Bobcat. Yes. Anyway, we're here to discuss licensing, music licensing in particular. And since I'm the moderator, I'm really going to turn this right over to Buddy and let him jump in and talk about some of the things. We're primarily here to answer questions for you. This is not the first year we've had this session. We've had it for several years. And we've talked about a lot of things that the Harry Fox and the BMI people have asked us to do and pay for year after year after year. And but there's always some issues that are kind of wandering around out there for some of the new folks or folks that's wanting to get into the music side of it. So we're hopefully going to answer those questions for you. If not, you can drop emails to me at tom@dosado.com, and we'll go through the Harry Fox people or the BMI people and get you some exact wording from those folks. Okay, turn it over to Buddy.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you very much. This, as Thomas said, this topic has been discussed at length quite a few times in the past. And so at the risk of being redundant, I will go to kind of glaze over or go over rather quickly a lot of the highlights in a very abstract manner. And then I want to address it individual circumstances and how the whole licensing issue applies to you. If I were to rather compress the subject, I would say that licensing falls into two categories. One is your performance license, which we already have through CALLERLAB, your BMI ASCAP license, which covers you for the actual performance of a given song. And let's take a song like Light My Fire. Light My Fire is a good example. When you pull Light My Fire out and you go to do it, that your licensing, which is required to perform that, is covered through CALLERLAB. In the case of Light My Fire, if you wanted to record Light My Fire and then turn around and take those recordings out and sell them or give them away or distribute them in any other fashion, that requires a mechanical license. The mechanical license is what covers the actual making of a physical product. There is a third form of licensing, digital licensing, which I'm not going to talk too much about. If anything, Tom is a much more of an expert in that field than I am. I'm going to limit my conversation to the mechanical licensing aspect of it. Mechanical licensing generally comes from one of two sources. You are either getting it from Harry Fox Agency, HFA.com, or you're getting it directly from the publisher. The difference being is that HFA does not represent every single song that's out there. And Light My Fire is a good example. Light My Fire is a song that when I released it on Hi-Hat, we went to HFA, and I could not find it there. In fact, there actually were about 4 or 5 different titles listed for Light My Fire. None of them were the one that was done by the Doors. And so the search begins. And if you are in that position of saying, I want to have this song out for availability, and I'll talk more about how this impacts you. But if you are in that position, it's your responsibility to find the proper licensing for this. And if you go to hfa.com, the easiest form on the internet, and they do not have that available, then you'll have to do pretty much what I did, which is to begin researching to find the writer and the publisher. The publisher, what we found, existed in New York. Contacted the publisher. They no longer represent the Doors music. Referred me to an operation in Anaheim. contacted the operation in Anaheim, and after 2 weeks was finally referred to a small office here in the San Fernando Valley, one-man operation who does all licensing for all of Jim Morrison's music and the Doors music. And that's all they do. And they were the ones who were able to finally produce a license. We did the same thing. We ran into the same problem when we went to do El Paso City, because Marty Robbins' music is represented not through HFA. Neither is any of the Lawrence Welk music. So it begins to be more of a search, a diligence involved in there. Exceptions to the mechanical licensing and the search for it are those items that are in public domain. And that is somewhat of a gray area. Yes, in general terms, let me say that in general terms, most songs that are published or written prior to 1923 fall in the public domain category. Most, not all. I'm not a lawyer. I am not going to give you legal advice on a particular song. That is up to you to research it. What we have found, in fact, is in some cases where we knew a song was in public domain, it still existed on HFA because someone had taken an old traditional song and reorchestrated it. They twisted it around as just enough in its arrangement. Not reorchestrated, but rearranged it, and thereby took a new license on it. And so you really have to look at it, because when I'm going to buy a license, I'm buying the license for the intellectual property for a particular song. And in the case of Light My Fire, it is the original song, not what someone has turned into a rap version of it or what someone has done something else with. We're looking for the original song in its original form. The licensing that we pick up is the responsibility of the owner of the production company. So in this case, all of the mechanical licensing that I have is what I went out and researched and purchased, because it's my responsibility to have it. It's not a get-out-of-jail-free card if you say, well, someone else is taking care of it for me. Because when everything comes down to the very end, and if I were to be held accountable for any one of my particular songs, I'm the one who has to stand before a federal judge and show him proof that I have licensing. Not my agent, but it is me, okay? Now, in specific terms, now that we've talked about the whole generality issue, how it applies to you individually. And I took what I consider to be maybe 3 instances of that I'm aware of personally, of people and how the music licensing impacts them directly. Before I go into each of these 3, I want to add that in my humble opinion, licensing and copyrights go hand in hand. I understand that there is a very clear difference between each, but when we talk about licensing and square dancing, we sometimes look at it and say, well, okay, if we get the license, we're okay. But there's another ripple to it, and that's the copyright. Now, let me tell you what I'm talking about here. In some of the instances, first instance that I can think of, a caller says, I want to make a CD of my singing calls so that I can give it away or sell it to my dancers. I want to use this as a promotional vehicle, because if I put a CD of my best singing calls out, I can start sending it around to the different clubs who are looking to book a caller. Many of you folks have seen this. Some of you have already done it on your own. What is the impact now? If I were to go out, for example, and put together a CD of my singing calls, each of those singing calls, when you go to reproduce that CD as a physical product that you are either giving away or selling, and there is no difference. It is distribution, period, either for money or for not. When you do that, you are reproducing this product, and that requires your mechanical license for each song. For each song. If you have 12 singing calls on there are 12 licenses. Additionally, if you're doing 12 singing calls, and let's say I'm going to do one song off of Fine Tune record, you're welcome. And I want to do one of Square L's records, or I want to do one of a TNT song. You now have to go back to each owner, each producer, and ask for permission to use that song. Because even though you've purchased a mechanical license to reproduce that song and reproduce that CD, you still have no right to use that music. The rights to use that music belong with the music owner. So if the song were a fine tune, what's your biggest hit right now? You're 16. So if I want to do You're 16, I need to have license for You're 16, and I need to go to all 27 producers of fine tune record. 28 producers now. Oh, Bill is in there now, and ask for permission to have You're 16 on that particular CD. Without it, you don't have the right to do any of those things. If you were to make a copy of You're 16, let's say I were to go ahead and buy You're 16 as a record, and I went ahead and copied it onto my hard drive. Say, oh, I'm done with it. I don't need this record. You got a copyright issue. Now you got an issue of music stealing, and yet this happens a lot. Now, what if you take a copy? You would go ahead and make a copy, and say, "Well, I'm going to go ahead and sell this." Right? I love your answers. I love it. He's very vocal. Oh no, and that's absolutely right. It is an oh no answer. Now, you and I can have this conversation, and it seems like a no-brainer, but to many people out there, it is not so obvious. It is not that obvious. There are many callers out there who think nothing of being able to make a copy of their entire record collection and say, I'm done with it, here, take it. Or, hey, let me make you a copy off the memory stick. The Napster mentality. And it's not, I don't believe in my heart there's an intent to hurt anyone. It's just wrong, and they just don't know it. And so if you hear this message and it'll go back out on the tapes that go back out, then everybody should become educated on the message. Does it have much to do with mechanical licensing? No, but I appreciate the forum in which to be able to say this. If you have a question, sir, we need to get you on the microphone.
My name is Art Parks. I'm from Covina, California. And this is probably something everybody in the room knows, but I'm just simply confirming. You can go ahead and put that sucker on your laptop, but you've got to archive the original and have it in your possession, and you're okay, right?
Yes.
Thank you.
And you don't have to carry it with you, but you do have to prove ownership of it if you ever get asked.
The final category that I want to talk about in licensing and copyrights, and here's one that I would encourage all of you to look at. Be a producer. Be a producer. Go out there and hire a band. Go out there and buy your mechanical licensing to do your favorite song, whatever your favorite song is. You hire the band. The music then is your property. You have the mechanical license, which gives you intellectual rights to produce that and reproduce it, and therefore sell it. And that puts you in a category of becoming a music producer, and you begin to add more music to the square dance world. There are many producers out there who have gone out there and done one song, never to be heard from again. But sometimes that one song was a fantastic song, a great arrangement, correct? Yeah, Tom agrees. So look at that. And perhaps that is the greatest way that mechanical licensing in our topic that we're talking about today truly impacts you, is if you were to step out there and become a record producer. Question back there.
Virgil Forbes from Maryland. Buddy, make something clear for me. If we produce a CD to send out to clubs as an audition, literally, and we've got permission from the various record producers, 10, 12, however many, or maybe we're lucky and can go to 1, 2 and get the rights to songs from 17 different labels between the two of you. Do we also have to go to Harry Fox or whoever and get a mechanical license to reproduce that disc with those 16 on it? Make that clear, please.
Yes.
How hard is it? How much does it cost?
HFA, Harry Fox, has recently changed their minimums. Their minimums used to be, was it 500, Tom? And that's changed now. And so the minimums are 25, I think. You can license for as few as 25 units. The service fee from Harry Fox. There you go. Yeah, the service fee from Harry Fox will probably cost you more than the license does for 25 units. But that's the right way to do it.
In addition to paying that, though, you also are obligating yourself and committing yourself to report to Harry Fox if you sell more than 25, or no, think about it, if you produce more than 25. It's your responsibility to send in quarterly reports of what you do. So the flip side and the easiest way most of us is we buy the license for 500 because in today's world we don't exceed that number very often, and you avoid the service fees.
Dollar amounts for 200. Let's see, 500.
It's $47.50. Yeah. It's 8.75 cents per.
I think $47.50 for about 500 units is about right.
So if you do 10 if you do 10 songs on a CD, you're looking at $470. If you do it the full way. I just did, and it's not a commercial, but I just did a CD for Ken Bauer and Gary Shoemate. Had 10 songs on it, produced 200 copies, paid it. Just did one for Jerry Junk, 300 CDs. So, if you do 300 CDs, it's just easy to pay the license and be done with it. But what we are doing, and Buddy might contest to this, we get approached all the time. Hey, can I use the Chaparral song, or can use the Boo Star record, or the whatever? And most of us have said yes. I'm saying yes, but you need to buy the mechanical license. Now, that's going to slow some of you down a little bit on producing the CDs, but it's the right thing to do. So we have started publishing and printing on the back of our CDs. Mechanical license have been purchased for this CD compilation only, yada, yada, yada. And so I don't know what you do, but I have now added, yes, you're more than welcome to use my Chaparral music on a singing call as long as it's not an instrumental. But you need to provide me a copy of the mechanical license.
Hi, Bob Tucker, Wichita, Kansas. On the band deal, do you pay them a royalty or do you just hire them and pay them one fee for the recording normally?
Yes. We pay in my particular instance, when we've hired a band, I just pay them a flat fee. There are no royalties involved. I mean, unless they want to collect that 1 penny per every 100 units that we've sold. That's correct. Session fees.
The flip side of that is if you go to Nashville, you're paying union scale. When you walk out there, you own it. It's yours.
All right, thank you. Eric, CALLERLAB, California. So in a practical sense, let me ask you this. Let's say you're doing a song and you bought licenses for 200 or 500. Do you exhaust all those licenses in producing it? Do you have to actually print or press all to your license capacity at your studio?
You mean, have we ever?
Well, do you normally?
No.
Okay, so my question then is you have some unused licenses sitting in stock, either with the producer or with you, Tom. In a practical sense, is it possible for someone to come along and say, I'd like to use a Chaparral record, or one of Buddy's songs? Do you have unused licenses that I can buy from you?
No.
You can't do that.
My understanding through Harry Fox is no. I purchased it to do it and have it done my way. It's the record has me or Ken Bauer or whatever on the flip side of it. It has that part number. It's set up through Harry Fox. Now, there's some discussion going on with Harry Fox now that we can amend that license, but the paperwork is astronomical.
Yeah, I agree. The license that we hold on any given title is issued to my company, which is Blue Star Records. There is no expiration date on it. It could take me decades to issue 500 units. And while it is transferable to the subsequent owner of Blue Star, not that there ever will be one, but my daughters, thank you very much. But it is not afford me that ability to say I'm going to loan, for example, Eric, the ability to use my license for 100 units of his CD. I do that. HFA does not. Harry Fox does not allow that to happen. Neither, because it is saying that Blue Star Records owns the intellectual rights to this given song in that medium. That's right. Physical or digital product. And so therefore I cannot sell or otherwise transfer to fine tunes. You'd have to have your own license for it.
And that's mainly because of piracy. Think about it. What if I wanted to go buy a Beatles license for 1 million copies and then start selling it off to anybody that's willing to give me money for it? And so it becomes a situation, and in the music world, when you start dealing with licensing and copyright issues, most of the time the answers are no to any of your questions because they cannot police it. And so the safest answer for them is no.
That's all I have to say. I'll turn it back over to Tom. Thanks.
I made a couple of notes. Buddy talked about public domain. If you are really serious about checking it out, there's a website called pdinfo.com. They are not 100%, but if it's on there, you pretty much can use it. If it's not on there, you can pretty much guarantee you're going to go buy a license somewhere. Okay? It's a nice website, easy to get to. It's, so pdinfo.com. From a pressing standpoint, we are obligated by law to have a copy of any mechanical license for any product we produce on file for the FBI to walk in and look at any time. Not only does Buddy have to have a copy, we have to have a copy on file. And we know of 2 instances where the FBI walked into the facility, they were not given the documentation, and they closed the doors right then. Shut them down. And it doesn't take long to figure out the rules. Now, if you come to us or Nashville, and I'm not sure about California because I don't deal with the California pressing plants these days, but I used to, now you provide the paperwork along with the music. They will not start the process without documentation. They can't afford to. They can't afford to. You talked about the fact that you copy your record and now they want to sell it. We get calls every day. I've got this collection. I finally moved them all to MP3. Would you put them on your website so I can sell them? I mean, they're not bashful about it. Well, we'll even give you a complete listing of every single one of them. I'm not interested, And we try to explain to them that they have to hold on to those, But it's an issue. MP3s, digital downloads. It's a separate mechanical license. Harry Fox it has developed programs that are very easy to work with to get those licenses today. The minimum requirements are much easier to work with. However, when you buy an MP3 license, you do have to report quarterly. You have to report, and not only do you have to report quarterly, you have to develop your reporting to match their programs. You can't just send them a piece of paper saying you sold 14 of these and 12 of these and 6 of these and 5 of these. It's got to be in their code, And Bill Hyman can contest the fact that he spent a lot of time and money getting those programs to match up so that he could conform to them. And if you don't have your money and your paperwork in by the 15th after the quarter, they're on the phone. You wouldn't think small companies, but they're on the phone. And along with that, I want to jump into licensing as far as BMI and ASCAP. If you are producing music or wanting to do promote music on the website, not only do you have to have the licenses, BMI, ASCAP require an additional license for sampling. You have to track how many hits you're getting per song on that website. You have to report that. You pay a premium. And just because you have 5 songs doesn't mean you only have to pay for 5. You're going to fall into a minimum requirement license, and it's not cheap. It's very expensive. And there again, your reporting methods can't be on a piece of paper. It's got to be in a program that matches BMI and ASCAP. If you have samples out on your website right now and you don't have BMI licensing, you are in really, really, you're risking your business. You're risking your business. Any questions about that part of it?
I just wanted to add something to what Tom was saying about the MP3 files, too, because here's another instance that has come up recently where we found, and I think you folks have all run into this, many of you have, where some friend of yours walks up and says, I've got this MP3 file here, I'm going to email it around to all my buddies, or I'm going to give it to you on a stick, and it's this piece of music that somebody did. And that's not quite true. I know in one particular instance it was a hoedown that actually is in the can on my record label that had somehow gotten out, and the fellow had taken it and modified it just slightly and added a few of the sound effects to it. And I thought, well, that is not an original piece of work. It is not something that is free of mechanical licensing, and in fact is something that should have a mechanical license, and really is something of a copyright issue, because whenever you take a piece of someone else's music, it is still that other person's music, and it is still a copyright issue, even if you modify it. I've heard comments that if you take something off the radio and record it and use it as hoedowns, that's okay. It's not really okay. If you're going to do that, go out and buy the music off the internet. Then you have the proper, proper channels and under which to own and use this particular piece of music. Anything else you wanted to add?
Particularly about hoedowns, I've had a lot of opportunities where people, hey, you got to hear this. This is a great hoedown. I'm using it. And find out it's been modified. It's some dance mix been modified. And I really want to use it. I mean, it is really that good. I force myself to go buy an original copy of that song. It's not 100% of what I'm using, but I force myself to go buy an original copy of that tune before I start using it as a modified hoedown. Thing about hoedowns, most of you probably think that, the hoedowns we use today, well, there's no mechanical. I mean, the guy went in the studio and did it, and it's not all the song. It doesn't matter. If you can pick out what song it is, even without the melody, if you can pick out what song it is, we're required to have a mechanical license for it. It's just that simple. You can't say, well, I only used 8 bars of it. Doesn't matter. If those 8 bars are that distinguishable to the song, you're committed.
One other thing which may have little to do with licensing, but again, this is a nice forum under which to address it. And here's another example of something that has come to my attention or directly involved me, was someone had said, or rather it was an email sent to me. It was an email exchange between 2 individuals, and individual 1 asks individual 2, hey, I used to have a copy of your record and I don't have it anymore. Can you go ahead and send me an MP3 file on it? And individual 2 said, no, I don't have that as an MP3 file, but here's a producer. Go ahead and talk to Buddy and see what he'll do for you. And, of course, I'm not going to send him an MP3 file. In general terms, record producers are not in the business of giving away music. Even if Tom burnt our brother made all of our records for free, and every band member came in and played for free, and every studio offered us no charge, we would still have to pay for our licensing. And that puts us in a position of never wanting to give anything away because we're still operating at a negative number. And so from a record producer standpoint, something to bear in mind too, everybody talks about the cost of being in the business. You can add the cost of licensing to the cost of being in business. We have studio, we have musicians, we have licensing. And of course we have the actual cost to make the product. A question from back here.
Lawrence Johnstone, Ukiah, California. Speaking of that, causes me to wonder about something. I'm not a producer, but I'm wondering about it from your standpoint as a producer, Buddy. Out-of-print records, where obviously these days it costs so much to press vinyl. And there are some records out there that I would like to get a hold of. They're just not available anymore. What is your ability to make those available as a new digital release? Is it just a mechanical license that you have to get and then you can put it out? Or are there other factors involved as well?
I'll address that in 2 forms. Speaking for me personally, my library of music is 2,000 pieces. I think it would drive Tom into an asylum if I were to put it out all in 1 month. By the way, Tom, next month we'll have the first 1,000 out. Okay. So it's not an issue of mechanical, but more of an issue of wanting to put it out in spread out over a period of time. I mean, the reality is most of the record producers out here have a large library of out-of-press records that we would love to be able to put out digitally, but we have to spread it out. It's just a matter of smart marketing and also being fair to the other producers out here because many of us have the same titles. And I know this is another recent conversation that was held. And we have a great deal of respect for each other, the record producers. And as such, if I have a buddy who's a producer and he says, listen, we're going to do Light My Fire. I said, great. I've got Light My Fire too. I'll wait a year. You go ahead and get yours out first, okay? Now, let me address your question from the standpoint of not being a record producer, but being a caller. If I have a particular record that I've scratched or nicked and it's an out-of-press record and I really want to have it again, I will find the producer. I will find whoever owns that. It takes an awful lot of work, but you can find them out there. And you can sometimes go back to them, and they may have that original record, an extra copy laying around that they're happy to sell you. The other way you can do it is by going to all the different dealers, because there are a lot of old record stores that have been bought out by other record stores, and you're going to find that record is probably sitting in a box somewhere in the corner. And you'll find that if you could really get down to Pam and Tom have thousands of records. Bob Shiver at A&S Records is another good source. Perry Barnes is a good source. Many of these people, Ed and Judy here, have a lot of records, and you'll find in their collection, you might find that one old record that seems to be out of print, but there may be 1 or 2 copies still around.
The other thing we are trying to do is, and if you look at the tape service, the review service that's coming out monthly, you're seeing more and more of the older songs being reissued on CD and MP3. We're making a very, very big effort and have for the last few years to taking up any space that's available on the service beyond the new releases to make sure that those things are being done. I've asked all the producers to start sending me files, and I literally just stack them so that as I build the tape service for that month, if space is permitting, I make sure I get one of these and one of these and one of these and one of these. And give me a prime example. Buddy, I know, has a big list of those, and he gives me several of those each month. Paul Bristow for Sting and Snow, he has given me his schedule of his catalog out through 2010 by month for each song that we're going to release on CD and MP3 to finish this entire catalog. So those things are being done. There's a lot of it going on. But just like Buddy said, there's only so much space and so much time, so we've got to do a little of it at a time. Got questions everywhere.
Rod Shuping, Fine Tune Records. But there's other things involved in that, because some of our stuff is on tape that's 20 years old that has to be processed. And so there's other costs involved in taking that out-of-print record and re-digitizing it, producing it towards quality. There is a lot of time and work involved.
That's a good point. A lot of this music we're talking about was done on 2-inch tapes, 24-track, 32-track, and those tapes have to be baked in a lot of cases. And even when they're baked, you usually get one run through with it, and you may or may not get what you want off of it. Some of the producers were smart enough to get their 2-track tapes, their 1/4-inch, and have those. But as a rule, I would guess over 50% of that music doesn't exist on tape today.
Virgil Forbes from Maryland again. Make something clear, primarily for the people who are buying the CD later. If you have a record, and I've got several that warp doing outside parades. We've all had that problem. Is it legal? Is it ethical? Two different questions. If a friend of mine has a good copy, for me to make a digital copy, I own a copy of the record. It's just not playable anymore. Is it legal for me to borrow somebody else's record to make a digital file for my use if I still have the original record, even unplayable?
I would say just buy another copy.
I was Bill Hyman from New Hampshire. I was waiting for somebody to ask that question. Thank you, Virgil. When your car is in the driveway, Virgil, and Virgil, you have to know Virgil and I are 20-year friends now. If your car is in the driveway and you have a flat tire, do you just jump over to your neighbor's yard, yank a compatible tire off of his car, slap it on your car, and drive away? Tongue-in-cheek, I ask the question. No. Say no, Virgil. No, okay. Say no. Okay, the reality is, take automobile tires as an analogy here, and it's actually a very fair one. Tires are good for, depending on what you bought, 30, 40, maybe 50,000 miles. If you drive like me, 15,000 miles. And when that tire is worn out, you got to buy a new one. If the vinyl or other file, digital file or CD is still available, you have to go to a vendor to buy that. If it's not available, coming back to the comment that Buddy made before, then you really have to do the search. It may be at a dealer who might have some used records, or maybe you can buy the vinyl from that other person, but you can't borrow their vinyl that is in good shape, make your digital file, and then use it.
Let me also add to that, too, because there are many, many Square Dance callers today who will buy our vinyl record and a CD at the very same time. They buy both. They want the CD to put right onto their laptop so that it's there, and they want that record so that they can go out there to these multi-caller events and just be able to walk up and throw a record on and get out of there. And I mentioned in a different session, I said the nice thing about records is they work. Every time. They don't warm boot. They don't crash. They work. So records, cost-wise, are not so prohibitive that you could not go out there and purchase both at the same time. Get yourself a digital copy and get yourself a nice vinyl copy if vinyl is your medium. The nice thing about having the digital is that it's a nice backup. On a CD format, if that's your choice. It's a physical backup that you can store, and it's, in many cases, a studio quality recording. And you're good to go with it. Tom, you want to add something to that?
No, that covers that part of it. I'm going to read your minds a little bit. I know you're sitting out there with some questions you haven't asked yet, and I'm going to give you a couple that at least have been approached by me. I'm teaching a class. and I want to make copies of my teachings, and I want to give them to my students. Legally, I can't do that. I can go buy the mechanical licenses, assuming I've contacted each producer of each piece of music that I'm using to teach my classes with, and then I go back to Harry Fox and buy the mechanical license for each one of those songs, and then I buy the license to cover that particular tape or CD that I'm going to give to that dancer. Flip side of it is the dancer comes to you and says, hey, I'd like to record the session so I can take it home and practice it. Is that okay? No. Unfortunately, it's not. Are we doing it? Probably. But you need to be aware that legally you can get yourself in a lot of trouble. You know, the mechanical licenses and the copyright license are very, very clear when it says for your own personal use. Very big words in those contracts. Your own personal use. The same thing is you got friends that want to do a demo and they don't have a caller. You know, make me up a tape with 5 songs on it so we can go over to the nursing home and do it. Legally, no. Now, if you're willing to spend the money to donate for the mechanicals and all that and get it done, yes, you can do that. Okay? But it's a tough one, and that's part of the tough world we're in. But none of this stuff comes cheap. We discussed the fact about the caller or the queuer wanting to sell their package now that they've got everything moved over. Those of you that use multiple computers, you already know that you're allowed to copy and transfer it because it's yours. You bought that, you're allowed to do that. They're your computers, you're allowed to do that. That's not really an issue anymore today. We're in discussions with Harry Fox right now. I get a call and say, I got a collection of 1,000 records and I don't know anything about computers, but I want to get there. Can I mail you my 1,000 records and you transfer them for me and send me back an MP3 file or CDs? Today, I cannot do that. Legally, I cannot get a license from Harry Fox to transfer your music to any other medium and give it back to you. Today, I get a call from a school that they want a piece of music, but it's only available on a 45, and they trashed their turntables 15 years ago, and they only use CD players. Am I willing to take that song and put it on a CD and mail it to them? I'm willing, but legally I can't do it. We're trying to negotiate with Harry Fox right now that to give me the ability to take that song, transfer it to the CD, and sell them the record and give them the CD. They're still shaking their head this way so far. But yet you can go on the internet, and there's a lot of companies advertising that they will transfer your music over. I use the word advertising. I'm not sure how much they're doing, but I'll guarantee you they're not doing it legally, at least not today. So be careful about taking your friend's records and recording them for him, because you've become the expert on the computer system, and giving them back to him. Be careful about the fact that he's got 500 songs on his laptop, and you just happen to have 200 records that are identical, and say, well, gosh, I already own them. Let me just move your files over to my computer. Sounds simple. Sounds right. You did pay for the record, but it's not legal. It's just not legal. Questions?
Virgil Forbes again. I know I'm getting some kind of strange things, but that's okay. CALLERLAB is kind of strange. There is no doubt in my mind or anybody's that I can take an old LP, and I've got some dating back to the 30s from my mom and dad's collection, good dance music from the big band era there's no doubt in my mind that it's legal and ethical for, since I own the record, to take that, create a digital copy, manipulate it, and turn it into a square dance song. Because In the Mood makes a great hoedown. The two questions, and they're really quite different. Number one, karaoke discs. Is it legal for us to buy a disc at our local karaoke store and turn it into square dance music, either singer or hoedown music? You know, we've bought the disc, we physically have the disc. Is the fact that we're crossing from genre, from karaoke popular to square dance, is that affected in any way? For my personal use, I'm not making copies for anybody.
You have purchased it. You have the rights to do with it what you want. You do not have the right to make a copy of your hoedown mix and give it off to anybody or sell it off to anybody. And I wanted to come back and address something, because you mentioned legality and ethics twice, and I thought, that's a very interesting thing, because I've heard this mentioned before, especially on internet forums. In my mind, there is a big difference between legality and ethics. Legality is legislated. And what we say to you here is a very broad brushstroke, really, when it comes right down to it. If you have a specific issue that you're unclear of, talk to the publishers, talk to Harry Fox Agency. The legality is prescribed to you by what we have in writing. And always, in my opinion, go by what's in black and white and not by what's a hearsay. Ethics comes from your parents or your mentor, whomever. And I have heard that comment made that, well, if I can, then therefore I may. And I would say, I'm sorry, my mom didn't teach me that way. My mom didn't teach me that if you could make a copy of somebody else's music and take it, that was okay. Ethics were taught to me in a different fashion. And if a person, and I've found myself beating my head up against the wall talking to certain individuals who could not see it, just this thick. But that's an ethics issue, as you mentioned earlier. And ethics is something that, in my opinion, cannot be legislated. And if you're in a situation where you've got somebody who is insistent upon going the opposite direction, I'm not going to spin my wheels trying to convince that person of the right way, because it's probably too late in their life to change them on it. I'm just not going to be a party to what they choose to do if I believe it's truly wrong. And I hope I didn't digress too much from the subject to answer that.
One of the other things in the digital world that we're into today, as far as MP3 downloads, and I ran into this a few months ago with a different group, different organization, they felt that if they bought 10 copies of a download and decided to write a dance routine to it, that they could take 9 of those copies and distribute it to their friends freely. Can't do it. In fact, I actually thought they were correct until I contacted Harry Fox, and the law states that even though you download 10 of them, they are still strictly for the private, personal use of the person that downloaded them. Even if they paid 99 cents or 69 cents to Walmart.com or whatever, they did not buy the rights to give them away, distribute, whatever you want to call that, even freely. And that is a big issue, because you would think, I bought it, it's mine. I can do what I want to with it. Wrong. You can do what you want to with it in the privacy of your own home and your own personal use. And fortunately, they've bent the rules a little bit that we can use it in our profession. We personally can, but that's the extent of the law. You can't go any further with it.
Tom Melton Luttrell from Fort Worth, Texas. I had originally spoken to you by phone, but so I'm primarily addressing this issue to Buddy. Have you ever heard, Buddy, of CCAT, the licensing agent for religious music? And we have been approached at home with a problem at our Swing Time Center. They billed us for like $650 for the use of their music. And I've contacted a couple of lawyers and Tom and other people. I've even gone as high as our church central council to see what covers music that's played within the church and used. And I'm still sort of in the fog on it as to what we should do. I think most of the advice I've had is to probably ignore it because we don't use enough of their music, but wondering if you had any experience with that.
The limited amount of knowledge I have on that relates more to the performance licensing and how it involved in churches and schools. They also have a whole different set of rules or guidelines that they operate by. I cannot address anything on the mechanical licensing side of that. Maybe if for no other reason that we don't produce any religious square dance music on any of my labels. Perhaps somebody else could address that.
He's addressing the performance, not the mechanicals. He's been billed for playing music in the church that they say they have performance licensing commitments on. In the dance hall. Yeah, in the dance hall. And
as we all know, some of the square dance music was based on some gospel tunes. And that was the primary issue, I think.
And my answer to him was, as far as I'm concerned, he's covered under his BMI and ASCAP license. However, if that particular tune is not under BMI and ASCAP, then he's not covered. But I wonder, is the song itself covered? And that becomes the bigger, muddier issue. Was there ever a license for the song to start with?
Getting back to something that you said earlier, Lottie Ainsworth from Louisiana, you said something about that whenever we take and record, like if we do a few tips and we record that and then we leave and the dancers use that's not right. I think everybody that has ever called a dance has had someone come up and want to record that dance. You're not recording it, they're recording it, and then they're taking it back and they're dancing on the street or whatever with it. Now, what do you do about that? You know it's wrong. You tell them you're not supposed to do that, but they're going to do. Who, in the end, whose fault is that and who's in trouble for that because that happened even though you're saying it should not have happened? And how do you handle that with the dancer who is the dancer who has hired you?
You simply tell them I'm not allowed to do that. I cannot give you permission. I do not have the legal rights to give you permission to do that. And that's the way you get. You do not have the legal rights to give them permission.
Understand that. But then who in the end gets in trouble? Does it come back to you? Or does it come back to that person who recorded your performance?
I think what you're saying is they were using your recording at some sort of activity, and someone come up and said, do you have a license to use this recording? Who is ultimately responsible?
Well, we know how lawsuits go. They work up the chain to wherever the most money is.
Yeah, in two ways to answer that, Lottie. Number one, you can always say that, because I happen to know who your record producer is, you can just say your record producer doesn't allow you to have any recordings made at your dance. But really, it goes to the heart to that if somebody were doing and I remember this back about 20 some odd years ago. There was out in the Midwest that this fellow would come into he'd hire in the traveling callers and he'd record the dances, and about 3 months later he would advertise, okay, we're going to have a big Frank Lane dance, but it wasn't Frank. It was Frank in a can, so to speak. It was playing the tape back at the dance and charging the full value to get in there. That person is the one who's responsible for it. I would never go back and say, well, Frank Lane was responsible for that situation, or anybody is. If somebody's making a recording of your dance and you don't know about it, then that person is really going to be on the hook. As Tom says, lawsuits are open all over the place. I agree with that. I'm not sure that that's a big enough fish that anybody would want to chase from a bigger standpoint. I think the bigger issue, though, without trying to make excuses for that, is to know what is right and wrong. And if somebody says, may I make a copy of your dance so that I can sell them? No. Sorry, my producer doesn't allow that. That could be a simple way out. And I've used that. I just say my producer doesn't allow that.
And part of those problems is like everything else. Where do you stop it? The local caller wants to record. You come in to do the dance, and they want to record your dance. And we used to all do that. We used to, hey, wait, man, he wants to record my dance? Sure. Twice in the last 2 days, I've had callers come up to me and say they were in this position where they were doing a dance and somebody wanted to record it. Both times they found out that the individual was recording in stereo, meaning he was getting the music tracks and the vocal tracks separate. Guess what he's going to do? He's going to use the music. Yeah, he's going to use it, yeah. And, so where do you stop it? How bad is it out there? I had a caller a couple months ago told me he was a very professional traveling caller up doing the dance. Had the same situation. Somebody wanted to record the dance. In fact, it was the caller he was doing the dance with. Decided to record the dance. The guy said, sure. And he happened to look down and see that he was recording it in 2 channels. And so the caller thought about it a little bit. He was mad, but he said, rather than bring up the issue, every time he called during the song, he would unplug it a little bit, and a little later he'd plug it back in. For the entire dance, he plugged and unplugged during the songs. It's a shame to think that, but give an inch, take a mile. These people do it. And it's really a shame. But, I understand. You really want to help some of those people, and you are helping some of those people. They need that kind of help. However, the flip side of it is there are vendors that sell videos and CDs and teaching tapes and demos that they can purchase that are licensed and paid for those type of things. And that, again, helps the business, the industry.
We hope they're licensed.
Yeah.
We hope they're licensed, and we hope they have copyright permission.
Questions? Concerns? It's a sticky subject. It really is. We've come a long way in the last 4 or 5 years in trying to broadcast. I know I've sat in this session for about 4 years now, and we were fortunate enough to have the NEC folks for like 2 years in a row, and they took it to heart. They really took this information back to their organizations, and then I personally know there was a lot of discussions on it. So we have come a long way from the dancer standpoint. I'm not sure how far we've come from the dance instructor standpoint. We have a long ways to go yet.
Well, I think ignorance is bliss. And a lot of people play ignorant whether they are or not. And I think in a lot of this stuff, they're thinking they're on the end of the line and they're never going to get in trouble anyway. What's right is right and wrong is wrong. And, even though everybody knows what's right, whether it be the music business or whatever, they're not always going to do what's right because none of us are perfect.
Yeah, I've started preaching, and I'm not an ordained minister, but I've started preaching the fact that we are the peers. We are the group that everyone else is looking at to see what we do. If somebody's, and they won't, but if someone sees me copy a song from one computer to another, they're going to think that's okay.
Good point. And we are the peers, and you if you practice as you preach, and you preach often, people know what to expect from you, and they pull and will act in a responsible manner. I know Andy's back there, and Andy will testify that in the San Diego area, there's a lot of guys who are sick of hearing me talk about buying the music. Am I right? Yeah, sure. They see me coming, they turn and walk away. It's okay. I'll catch up with them. But if you do the same, walk the walk, then you're in a much better position, and you improve your own surroundings. And I wanted to add one more thing too, just from a producer standpoint, because I think that also, as I'm thinking about this, what we covered here is sometimes the producers kind of get the record producers of your square dance music seem sometimes like a villain in the whole thing. We're the ones who are telling you all about this, but we're really not villains. We're just folks who are trying to put out some music that we feel somebody will enjoy. Where no one is in the business to make money. None of us have our health care paid by our record producing companies. We don't have fine-tuned charge cards or Blue Star charge cards. It's a specialty market, and you have to remember that. If you look at CALLERLAB today, as a good representation, we don't have thousands of attendees anymore. We have hundreds of attendees, and we don't have thousands or tens of thousands of dancers. We have thousands of dancers. We have hundreds of callers, and so the market is smaller. The market is a specialty market. We do what we can to survive while being as fair as we possibly can with everybody who is in the purchasing crowd. And believe me, I do feel I speak on behalf of my fellow producers. We sincerely appreciate your support. We sincerely appreciate your purchases more than words could ever describe to you. And if you think that's just a false face, it's not. We all feel it from the heart. When somebody says, I'm buying the music and we're not going to give it away and I want nothing to do with these people who do that, we really appreciate that. And I think I speak on behalf of my producers when I say that. Thank you.
Got a question real quick?
All right. If you say so, sir. I'm going to go a little bit afield here, and I think I already know the answer. But you can buy, in any music store, sheet music for songs and stuff like that. There's a copyright and ownership on that sheet music too. Can you perform that publicly, legally?
When you say perform, what do you mean? Sheet music's just a piece of sheet music. Are you talking about digging out an instrument and playing that song?
Yeah. And singing.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
More power to you. Record it when you do that, will you?
Suppose you're being paid to do that. I mean, you make dough in the performance.
Hope you do.
Oh, okay. You don't own the copy. The copyright owner anything?
He's tickled to death. He's glad you're doing that. That's
okay.
That's what sheet music's for.
Thank you, sir.
Matter of fact, there were a few callers in the good old days that purposely did some of that. They brought their instruments with them to the stage, and they played those songs. Sometimes they played them in accompaniment to a record. Yeah.
Anytime you see a band, a concert, they've all got the sheet music.
Except Nashville.
They have chord charts.
They have numbers.
Dave Harry, I truly believe that's not true. The house that you're playing for still has to have a mechanical license for the music being played. It's still music.
No.
Excuse me, a performance license for the music being played. Somebody, if it's a public performance, there still has to be a performance license available.
Right, but he's asking about mechanicals. He doesn't owe anybody anything.
Yeah. You can play it in your own house, probably for your family members, but you can't play it in public. That doesn't cover it either.
Sure does.
Unless you guys have changed the rules, because I do live music, and the rules were that a club could only hire live music like once a year or something like that on the license that was issued to CALLERLAB.
That's true. That's true. But the facility that is sponsoring that event is liable for the performance license.
Right. If they have a license, then it's covered. But
as a square dance caller, if he walks up on stage with his guitar and plays a song, he's covered completely.
I don't think so. That's not the way it was presented years ago when you first got the licensing for CALLERLAB, because that was a specific question that I asked, and I wasn't covered. I was covered in that I could do a dance or two, but I couldn't do every single dance for the clubs that I was doing live music.
I think that for the performance license issue, that would be a good question to take back and address with the Home Office and allow them to do the investigative work on the performance licensing. But speaking to the topic that we have here on the mechanical licensing does not impact you at all unless you decide you want to record yourself and start selling off the copies, in which case you'll need to purchase a mechanical license, assuming that it is something that is not within public domain.
Any other questions? We thank you for attending. Have a nice hand for Buddy. We do appreciate you getting up this morning.
Nice hand for Tom Dillander.
And if you do have questions, email either one of us. We'll be glad to get your answers for you.